Excellent. Good evening. I'm Jayanne Rock. I will be your host this evening. I am the Director of Information and Education with the DCM Foundation, and you're here to see insights and hope when living with a device. We have a wonderful guest speaker with us tonight. We're so excited you could join us. I hope you're staying cool wherever you are. All microphones are on mute upon joining so that we can hear the speaker. And please be sure to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of Zoom. If you have any questions during the webinar, we'll have a Q&A portion at the end. Next slide, please. For anyone who's new to the DCM Foundation, we provide hope for people with DCM. We basically, through our various programs, we provide hope and support to DCM patients and families with dilated cardiomyopathy, and we do that through education, research, and advocacy. Next slide. Again, an extended Q&A session will follow tonight's presentation. Please do enter your questions into the Q&A feature of Zoom at any time, and we will get to those at the end of the presentation. Next slide. Wonderful. We have a packed agenda here tonight. The topics we will be reviewing include the types of devices, the criteria to get a device and why consider getting a device, fears and anxiety around having a device, recovery from implantation procedure, getting back to life and living with an implanted device. And that's, I think, my favorite part of this entire presentation, because our guest speaker has great experience to share with you about that. And then we'll have our live Q&A. Next slide. So I want to give a shout out behind the scenes. We have Justine, as always, helping on the tech side. So thank you, Justine. So if we can push forward the first poll, we'd like to know who's attending tonight's webinar. Are you a cardiomyopathy patient, a family member or friend, a medical professional, or an industry professional? And if you are more than one, choose whichever is most suitable for tonight. Great, a couple more seconds here. Great, if we can end the poll and share the results. Not too surprising. So more than 80% are cardiomyopathy patients, and another 10% are family members or friends. And then a small portion are medical or industry professionals. Great, thank you for joining us tonight. We're glad you could be here. So let's get right to it. Next slide, please. So Doug Raychak is our guest speaker this evening, and we've had him on a number of times, several times before, and he's really fantastic. Doug started his career with Medtronic back in 1997, and since then he has spent a total of 17 years at Medtronic working in various roles. He is not currently employed by any medical device company, but he's sharing his own personal knowledge and experience with us today, and we're so glad he could be here. In 2014, ironically, while working for Medtronic's heart division, Doug experienced 2 episodes of fainting and a number of episodes of racing heart, lightheadedness, tunnel vision, etc. And it was determined that he needed a defibrillator to protect him from sudden cardiac death. So that was the start of his own personal journey with having a device. Next slide. So after he received his defibrillator, he started reaching out to other device patients and learned that his knowledge could benefit others. So he started a YouTube page first, and he began moderating several patient support groups on Facebook and Reddit. And he's even most recently started dabbling on TikTok. So we will have a number of links to share where you can find Doug's channels, and we'll also email that after tonight's presentation. So next slide. Great, Doug, thank you for being with us tonight. Thrilled you could be here.
My pleasure. It's good to be back with you again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I've spoken to several people who knew you were the speaker for tonight, and they were very excited. So anyhow, good. Yeah, people are looking forward to this. Next slide. So let's get into it a little bit here. First, kind of from an overview perspective about the types of devices. I know you personally have a defibrillator, but can you give a short description of the various types of devices a person with a heart condition might hear about or have implanted in their bodies?
Sure. Yeah, I'm going to start with a diagnostic tool. And actually, this is what I started with when we weren't sure what was going on with my heart. My doctor was trying to figure out, was this actually heart related? Was it blood sugar level? Was it something else? And so this is a tool that doctors can use. It's called a loop recorder. It's very small. This is placed under your skin, just in the chest, and it monitors your heart. This is similar to a Holter monitor. So some people will wear a Holter monitor. It's an external device. It hooks onto your side. It's got a battery pack, and that will record your heart for a long period of time, usually 20 days, 30 days, something like that. This will actually be in your chest for up to 4 years, and it records your heart rate 24 hours a day. And if you have any kind of symptoms, any kind of episodes, you can activate a little switch that tells it to hold on to that recording, to save it and send it to your doctor. And then they can take a look at what was happening when you were feeling lightheaded and can determine if you were having a cardiac event. And this is what happened to me. And actually, it led to my getting a defibrillator. So that's called a loop recorder. And this is just a diagnostic tool. You may move on if you have a slow heart rate to a pacemaker. And this is a pretty small device that's designed to keep your heart from beating too slowly. So if your heart beats too slowly, you might feel lightheaded or dizzy. You might get tunnel vision. You may even pass out if your heart rate goes too low. So sometimes heart rates will drop below 20 or 30 beats a minute. They can even pause for a period of time. I've seen people who have passed out from heart pauses that have been 6 seconds long, and people who have had up to 3 minutes of a heart pause, and then it just picks back up on its own.
Oh.
A pacemaker will prevent that from happening. So this is a good tool to have. I ended up with a defibrillator, and this is actually, believe it or not, my first defibrillator. This is the real one. This was inside my body.
Wow.
You can see it's a different size than the pacemaker, a little bit bigger. This also goes in the upper chest, and it is designed to keep your heart rate from going too fast. So if your heart rate takes off really, really fast, that can be a bad thing, especially if it gets up over 200 beats a minute. Your heart's not really pumping anymore. It's kind of quivering. And a defibrillator's job is to save you basically from a cardiac arrest. And so what it does is it will send a shock to your heart that will reset your heart and put it back into normal heart rhythm. And that's probably the most common device that folks with cardiomyopathy end up with if they end up with an implanted device, is a defibrillator. Now there's one more category of devices called cardiac resynchronization therapy, or CRT. And there are pacemaker versions and defibrillator versions of this device, but they are designed to get the bottom chambers of your heart beating together. Because if they're beating out of sync, this will affect your the ability of your heart to pump blood through your body effectively. So if they're beating out of sync, the CRT device will cause the bottom chambers to beat together, and then your heart will be much more effective. And this will, hopefully make you feel better in the long run.
Oh, wow. Excellent. That's
Actually, I'll show you
interesting.
these two. I forgot to show you. I've got them sitting here, but
The CRT.
this is a CRT pacemaker, and this is a CRT defibrillator. So a little bit bigger than a regular pacemaker, a little bit bigger than a regular defibrillator.
Excellent. It's so cool that you have your original device. That's really interesting.
Yeah. Something
and
most people don't know is that if they get a device changed, they can ask for their original one back, so they can get it back. Kind of cool.
That's interesting. And what is the latest technology a person might hear about with regard to devices?
So there's two that I'd talk about in particular. First is with the pacemakers, and again, this is the regular size. This is today's pacemaker size, and the latest pacemaker is this little one right here, and this is called a leadless pacemaker. It's actually inserted directly into your heart. This is inserted in the upper chest with a lead wire that goes into the heart. This one is inserted directly into the heart. It's amazing technology. These little batteries in here will last upwards of 13, 14 years. Just amazing technology. And there's a couple of companies out there that now have that pacemaker. And then on the defibrillator front, there is a new defibrillator out there. And this is called the extravascular ICD, or EV-ICD. Now, Boston Scientific has a version of this device out there called an SICD, and they've had it out for about 10 years. But this one is actually placed on the left side, and it has this interesting lead that goes under your sternum. And this is a new technology because most defibrillators, like mine, that go in the upper chest, they have wires that go into the heart. And this one has no wires inside the heart. So this is completely outside of the vascular system. Some people don't like to have wires inside their heart. Some doctors recommend that for different kinds of patients. So this one is the newest technology. It's just been out for about 8 or 9 months, and it is almost identical. It functions almost identically to the traditional ICDs that we've had around for, since the 1980s.
It's incredible. The advances, it's just incredible. I have so many questions, but
That's what I'm
so
here for.
I do, yeah, exactly. And I do encourage people to drop their questions into the Q&A. So let's get back to the deck for a second, Justine, and I'd like to talk a little bit about the criteria to get a device and why someone might need an implanted device like one of the ones you've mentioned.
Sure. Most common reason why a person would get a device or why they would even be in a doctor's office to talk about a device is because of symptoms. And the most common symptoms are lightheadedness, dizziness, tunnel vision, shortness of breath, maybe unexplained sweating. Those are kind of the signs that something's going on with your heart and that something that should be checked by your doctor. One of the tests that they'll run is with an echocardiogram. They will check how much blood your heart is ejecting with each beat. And this is called your ejection fraction. One of the examples I talk about, like, what does it look like when your heart pumps blood out? It doesn't completely empty. So the ejection fraction is a percentage of how much blood is ejected with one pump of your heart. And if you take a water bottle, a plastic water bottle, and you squeeze it really hard and you let it go, there's going to be water left in the bottom. And that's, your heart does the same thing. So a normal ejection fraction, or EF, is around 55 to 70%. That's a normal, healthy heart. That's what, athletes have. That's what normal people have, is 55 to 70. When your EF starts to drop, this is when you might start experiencing symptoms. And when it gets below 35, you are indicated or you are able to get a defibrillator. Now, the doctors will try to fix the EF with medication. And so that's usually the first course of action, is 3 to 6 months of the latest medications, which are amazing, by the way. But if they're not able to bring that EF above 35, then they'll probably want to talk to you about an implanted defibrillator. And that's important because you're trying to prevent a sudden cardiac death. And that comes about from a sudden cardiac arrest. There are 400,000 deaths in America every year from sudden cardiac arrests. They are incredibly deadly. If you have a cardiac arrest, your chance of survival just out in the wild is about 8%. It's really low.
Wow.
But if you have a defibrillator, your chance of survival is around 98 or 99%. They are incredibly effective. The other way that people survive cardiac arrest is through CPR and the use of automated external defibrillators, the AEDs that you see people using. So symptoms in EF are probably the two biggest indicators of why a person might need a device. The other is genetics. There are certain genetic markers that you may not even have any symptoms, but let's say you have a family history of cardiac death. So you've had, maybe your grandpa died at age 60 unexpectedly. And maybe your mom has some kind of heart issue. So if it runs in the family and you end up getting a genetic test, there are certain genetic markers that if you have that genetic marker, that may make you eligible for a device even before you start feeling symptoms. And kind of a shout out to the DCM Foundation. You guys have an incredible genetic testing program that you're working with right now. You're working with a genetic testing company that can help people get low-cost genetic testing. And that was something that I went through. It turns out I do not have a genetic marker, but it was not covered by my insurance. It was around $3,000, and I know your testing is far lower than that. So I highly recommend people try out the genetic testing to see if you have a marker.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. And that genetic link is so important. I think a lot of people haven't even really considered the fact that if they don't have symptoms, but they have a genetic marker, that they may still be eligible to get a device, which could save their life. And when you talked briefly about CPR and the AEDs and so forth, does that greatly increase people's chance of surviving sudden cardiac death?
It does. You know, but it has to be witnessed first of all. So someone has to see you collapse, and then
Mm.
they have to know how to do good CPR, and that can increase your chance of survival to around 20 or 30%. And then if there's an automated external defibrillator nearby and they use it quickly, it has to be within the first few minutes, you know, 5 to 7 minutes max. That increases your chance of, you know, around 40 to 60%, depending on how quickly they're able to use it and how effective it is. But even then, if a doctor is talking about getting if your doctor's talking about getting a defibrillator in particular, I would seriously consider doing that just because of how deadly sudden cardiac arrest is.
And basically, it's like having that team of people in your chest, and it knows instantly. And
Yeah, and it's quick. A defibrillator will diagnose a fatal heart rhythm, and then it has to charge the capacitors. That takes a few seconds, but from the moment it sees a fatal rhythm to the moment it delivers a shock, it's anywhere from 7 to 12 seconds. And so
wow,
usually by the time a bystander, you know, registers in their head, this person has collapsed, and they rush to your side and they're about ready to start CPR, by that point, you're waking up because your defibrillator has done its job.
wow, that's incredible.
It's
Um,
incredible technology. It's
well,
amazing.
that leads us actually right into the next slide. Justine, if you could forward one slide. Why consider getting a device? I
Yeah.
mean, we've just covered this a little bit, but if you can talk a little bit more about the benefits of having a device.
Definitely, the big one is a big one is helping with the symptoms that you're having. If you're especially if your heart is not be able to keep up with you. So if you're either your heart rate is dropping low, or when you're exercising, your heart's not keeping up to you with the level that you need. Let's say you're running and it's only able to beat at 90 beats a minute. You will feel lightheaded or out of breath or fatigued. And so, yeah, a big one is just being able to feel better in your daily life. Now, pacemakers help with the slow heart, but so do most defibrillators. So even if you're you know, if you have a defibrillator, they all have built-in pacemakers. Almost all of them have built-in pacemakers. So even the defibrillators can help you feel better. That is especially true with that cardiac resynchronization therapy, the one that gets the bottom chambers beating together. There has been some amazing results in not only helping people feel better with CRT, but actually reversing the effects of cardiomyopathy. In some hearts, they've been able, the heart has remolded back into its healthier form. And so they're reversing the effects of cardiomyopathy by helping the heart beat together and pump blood effectively through the body. So that's a big one. And then the other one is it can save your life. Both pacemakers and defibrillators, they save lives every single day. You know, again, pacemakers, if your heart is pausing, that's a big deal. That's a big problem, especially if it's for a long period of time. So the pacemaker will prevent that from happening ever. As soon as that heart rate drops, if your heart skips a beat, the pacemaker will be there to beat for you. And so you won't even skip a beat. And then on the other side, the cardiac arrest, if you experience that really fast heart rhythm and you slip into ventricular fibrillation, you slip into a fatal rhythm, the defibrillator will be there for you. And again, with the CRT devices, there is the pacemaker version and the defibrillator version. So the main function is getting the bottom chambers to beat together, but you can still have a device that has a defibrillator on it if you're at risk for cardiac arrest. So yeah, helping you feel better, helping you get back into your daily life, feeling more confident about your health, and then also
Absolutely.
saving your life. That's a big one.
And so are there any drawbacks to having a device then?
Well, you know, there's a foreign piece of metal in your body. That's something to get used to. It took me a little while to get used to that.
Mhm.
There are some minor considerations with careers. So, for example, people who have defibrillators can't drive an 18-wheeler, can't get a CDL license. We can't also be pilots. Those are just jobs that they don't allow you to be if you have a defibrillator. If you have a pacemaker, you can do those jobs. You know, I can't work in the turbine room of a hydroelectric dam, so my dream of working at Hoover Dam is dashed. You know, so there's some limitations, but really the devices are there to help you, to protect you, and to enable you to do all of the things that you want to do. So there aren't any restrictions of like activity levels. I road bike, I box, I play basketball and soccer, I scuba dive. Like I do all the things that I want to do because my device is there protecting me and enabling me to do that, to do those things.
Yeah, that's such a great story and testament to having a device. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. And Justine, if we can go to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about what I'm sure a lot of people are thinking or dealing with if whether they have a device or are considering getting a device. A lot of people have a lot of fear and anxiety around actually having a device. If you can talk a little bit about that and like how you may have dealt with some of those feelings.
Yep. Fear and anxiety is a completely normal reaction. It's actually been measured in studies that anxiety levels are very high for people who have cardiac issues and heart-related issues in particular. So getting a device is it's a big thing in most people's lives. So that reaction of fear and anxiety is totally normal. This is something that you can talk to your family and friends about. You can talk to your doctor about. And for some of us, myself included, I ended up spending 2 years with a therapist to kind of wrap my head around this. I was 40 years old when I got my device, two young kids, was quite healthy. I mean, the day before I went into the hospital, I ran 9 miles. You know,
Well,
this was just a totally new thing for me. It was hard to wrap my head around.
mm,
But what I learned was that by learning more about the device, about my condition, and about the ability that I had to get back to normal life, that is what helped me calm my fears and calm my anxieties and control that. Because again, I know that my device is there to protect me. It's not there to limit me. It's there to protect me and then enable me to do all of these wonderful things that we want to do. I'm going to Australia and New Zealand in a couple of months. We're going to do hiking and kayaking and all sorts of fun things. So it's a normal reaction to be fearful. It's a whole new thing. Like I said, this hunk of metal that's in your body,
mm.
it is, it takes a little bit to get used to, but you do get over it and you do get used to it. And honestly, most days I don't even think about it anymore.
So this is your 10-year anniversary this year.
Yeah, September. Actually, we'll be landing in Sydney on the day that I got my device. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's another testament to like getting out and doing the thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what was your biggest fear, you know, before you got it?
The biggest fear I had, it was actually shortly after I got the device.
Okay.
My procedure was a little rough, and so I spent an extra night in the hospital. I spent 2 nights in the hospital afterwards. Tried to get up to go to the restroom, like probably 6 hours after my surgery, and I had a little cardiac event. It was very brief. The little monitor beeped at me, and I looked at it, and it said ventricular fibrillation, and then it went away. And that was probably just a result of, when doctors poke your heart here and there, your heart takes a little bit to heal. So that was just probably a result of that.
Yeah.
But I felt lightheaded. I felt fatigued and winded. Like I couldn't even get up to go to the bathroom. And 5 hours later, I was doing that. But in that moment, I had this horrible feeling. I'm 40 years old. I feel like I'm 100. I'm probably never going to reach the age of 80. And so that means my life is already half over. And that hit me really hard. And what I came to realize is there's absolutely no reason why I couldn't live to 80 or 100. There's no reason at all. These devices actually extend your life. They don't shorten it, they extend it. So there are babies that have had people who have had devices since they're babies and they're now in their 50s. They've had devices for 40 years, 50 years.
Right.
And they're doing just fine and they're going to live a long healthy life because of these devices. So that was probably my biggest anxiety. And again, it took me a little while to wrap my head around it and get used to it and come to accept it as part of my body, part of my life, and get back out there and enjoy it.
And I love how you said, a couple of years of therapy. I mean, generally, the DCM Foundation, we always advise people there's a lot going on when you have DCM, when you have a device. seek out therapy. There's no shame in doing that. It's the absolute opposite. You can live, a much better life and feel more confident. And I loved what you said about um, learning more increases your confidence. Like
Mhm.
learning more about devices kind of takes away some of that fear and anxiety and actually instills confidence the more that you hunt around and learn. And of course, you have your channels that will show at the end as well, which are, I think, some great resources and very, I don't know, family friendly or
Mhm.
patient
Yep.
friendly. Um, so tell me a little bit about like some of the misconceptions. I know on the internet there's some stuff people have read probably that, makes their hair kind of go on fire about devices.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'll tell you the three big ones are first one's magnets. There's this fear or there's a belief that magnets will damage your device or turn it off or scramble the programming, and that's not true at all. They've actually been designed from the beginning to interact with devices safely. So a device is designed to be safe when it comes into contact with a magnet. It actually will cause the device to switch modes, so it'll cause it to perform a particular function, and that's an
Oh,
intended design. It's actually used by doctors and nurses either to test the device or, in the case of defibrillators, if you put a magnet on a defibrillator, it'll prevent the defibrillator from shocking. And surgeons use that during surgery because they obviously don't want the device to shock during surgery for any reason. And
yeah.
so they just put a magnet on top of you and they monitor you externally with an AED nearby if they need it, or they can just take the magnet off and let your device do its thing if something happens. But yeah, they don't want your device shocking you during surgery. So they just put a magnet on top of it. It's totally safe. And actually magnets need to be really, really, really close in order to interact with a device, like within an inch or two. So the
Okay.
medical device companies recommend 6 inches of distance between a magnet and your device. So I can be holding a magnet, even a rare earth magnet, a really powerful one, as long as I keep it 6 inches from my device, there's no problem at all. And
Mm.
even if you do come in contact with it, it's not a big deal. The device will switch modes, and then when you move the magnet, it'll switch back to your normal programming. So there is absolutely no concern about being around magnets. That's okay. So that's number one. Number two is airport security. And this is there's a good reason why there's misconception out there, and it's because in the 80s and the 90s, there was a problem that was happening with devices, and they determined that one of the reasons why this problem was happening was people were going through airport security and coming into contact with a large magnetic field, and it was causing problems with the device.
Mhm.
And this is actually no longer a problem because they knew that this was such a common thing, people traveling, that they actually completely redesigned the device. They re-engineered it so that
Okay.
it wouldn't be affected by airport security. So
Oh,
now, today, all the medical device companies, they have information on their websites. They say you can go through the archway, you can stand in the full body scanner, the one that rotates around you, you can
yeah.
be wanded. This is at airports, at venues, at concerts and ball games and things like that. It's totally safe. It's not going to mess up your device. It's not going to interfere with it. It's not going to cause your device to pace you or shock you or anything like that. It's just a momentary period of time that you're in this field and you walk through it or they wand you and you're done. And it's no harm at all, none at all. So airport security, venue security, it's all totally safe these days. And then the
Awesome.
last one is MRIs, MRI
Mhm.
machines.
Yep.
Uh, the studies show that about 1 in 3 adults is going to have an MRI in their life. So that's kind of an important thing. And again, the medical device companies, the engineers at these companies, they are brilliant. They figured out how to design a device and how to design leads that aren't affected by MRIs.
Okay.
So there's a process where they put your device into a different mode and that protects the internal, electronics of the device. So there's a little bit of a process where they do that, but today's devices, if you've had a device in the last, 5 to 7 years, they're all they're all called MRI compliant or MRI safe. And there's no need to worry about that. The only concern that people have is if they have really, really old leads in their body. And
Okay.
there are some leads that are not considered MRI safe. So they're not labeled by the FDA as safe in an MRI field. But there's a lot of large hospitals that have these fantastic protocols that as long as they follow the protocols, they can do MRIs on old leads. So,
Okay.
and that's even if the lead's not hooked up to your device anymore, even if it's what they call an abandoned lead. So it's still in your body, but it's capped. It's not being used, but it's still in your body. They can do MRIs in certain cases with those leads.
Okay, excellent. Well, that's very helpful to know. Answer some questions.
Yeah,
Um,
the engineers are really smart, and they keep changing devices and making them better and better. So just everyday things are not really a problem for us.
yeah, that's fantastic. And Justine, if you can go to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about, if you can talk a little bit about the implantation procedure and the recovery process from that. Here's a photo of you with your pup resting
Yeah,
up after him.
that is Lola, our greyhound. Yeah, she could tell that something was wrong. And so when I came home from the hospital and was laying on the couch with some ice packs on my chest, she was there to make sure I was okay. Um,
Oh,
So the implant procedure is pretty easy. They are very quick nowadays. So a pacemaker implant can be done in about 30 minutes, and a defibrillator implant about 45, 50 minutes. The CRTs are a little more involved. They can go about an hour and a half. Sometimes the person will be awake during the procedure, and
yep.
that sometimes worries people. My dad was a little worried about that when he got his pacemaker, but he said he had a lovely conversation with the surgeon. They talked about the college that they both went to, Marquette University, and then they talked about the holidays that were coming up. And Dad said we were just talking away, and then all of a sudden we were done.
Oh
And
my
so
gosh.
you may be awake. I was asleep for mine. They were going to be doing some testing with the defibrillator, so they didn't want me to be awake for that. So I was asleep during my implant. So it depends on the circumstance and your
Yep,
surgeon. But
yep.
the way they implant devices, and I'll demonstrate with a pacemaker, is they first will snake a lead, and this is a lead wire. It's very flexible, you can see, very
Yep.
strong. They will snake this into a vein and down into your heart. And then they place it in the right spot in the heart, wherever they need it. And then they'll take the pacemaker and they'll put it in a pocket that's under the skin, and then they'll sew you up. So it's a pretty simple procedure,
Okay.
straightforward. It's been done. I mean, pacemaker procedures have been done since the late 50s, I think. So it's been
Mhm.
around for a long time. And then there's a period where they want you to recover. They want you to rest. This is surgery, after all. They don't want you to rip your incision open, and they want you to take it easy. I
Right.
found that ice packs helped a lot. It helped keep the swelling down, and so it helped keep the pain down. There is a little bit of pain because they're cutting your skin. They might be cutting your muscle a little bit.
Mhm.
So the recommendation is keep your incision dry for 7 to 10 days. And then after that, you can shower and bathe. What they told me is after 3 days, I can shower as long as I'm able to protect that spot. And so I took, well, it was surgical tape really, and
Okay.
saran wrap, and would tape basically a patch around my wound. And
Yeah.
then the shower head was hitting my back and I could shower, which is really nice.
Yeah.
So 7 to 10 days, keep it dry, and then you take the bandage off and you let it breathe and heal on its own. And then you're supposed to take it easy for 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah.
At, After that, you can get back to your normal, your normal routine.
Yeah.
And
That's
by
great.
normal, that means whatever it is that you normally do. If you run marathons, you can get back to training for a marathon. If you
Yeah.
climb mountains and ride your bike, you can slowly get back into that so that by the 3 month mark, you are 100% back to where you were the day before your surgery.
And now you can do those things with confidence.
Yeah, and some people, they read on the internet, they say, well, what about lead dislodgements, lead fractures? Those really aren't a problem. They are very, very rare. They do happen, but they are very rare. And the studies show that it's really not anything that we do as patients that cause that. It's not like throwing a baseball is going to cause your lead to fracture, or golfing or swimming or anything like that.
Yeah.
The leads are robust. They are put in place. Sometimes they dislodge. It's pretty rare. It's like 1%, 2%, somewhere around there. So yeah, the doctors recommend that as long as your heart and your health can handle it, get back
Hmm.
to a routine, because your device can definitely handle it. I mean, these things are made of titanium. So, you're not going to hurt it by, taking an elbow or a baseball to the chest or something like that.
Interesting. And so one other quick question. What was the hardest part about recovery for you personally?
Slowing down. I mean, really,
Yeah.
like I said, I think it was 9 miles the day before my surgery. I wanted to get back to
Yeah.
exercising, and I really needed to slow down and make sure that I recovered. I didn't want to set myself back with
Yeah.
either opening up that incision again or just hurting myself. And so that was the hardest part, was just slowing down, listening to my doctor, listening to my body, and then slowly coming back into my normal routine.
Yeah, especially if you ran 9 miles a day before. You're trying to fit it all in right before
Yep.
you. Oh, next slide, Justine, please. This is my favorite slide out of this deck. Getting back to life and living with an implanted device. And it looks like you've been doing it all. So yeah, talk to me just a little bit about your experience getting back to life. I mean, your doctor said something that I think everyone should hear.
Yeah, my doctor's great. I love him. He's fantastic. And one of the things he told me when I was asking about what are my restrictions, what can't I do? And he said, you can do anything you want to do. And I was joking with him and I said, skydiving, which I have no desire to skydive. And he said, yeah, you can skydive. And he said, listen,
Wow.
your device is there to protect you. It's there to enable you to do these things. And the thing he told me was, you're not allowed to use your device as a reason to not do something.
Yep.
So he said, if you want to mow the lawn, you can do that. If you want to climb a mountain, you can do that. If you want to scuba dive, you can do that. Scuba diving, you do have to ask your doctor about. It really depends on your heart condition. And
Okay.
mine allows me to scuba dive. There are some that don't allow you to do that. There's other conditions like there's certain elements of long QT syndrome where you're affected by adrenaline. So doctors might tell you don't go on roller coasters. It's because of the adrenaline that it can cause heart flutters or even cardiac arrest. But your device can handle a roller coaster. So as long as your heart can handle
Hmm.
an activity,
Yeah.
you're able to get back to do it. So that was a big thing my doctor said. Don't let your device hold you back. You know, this is there to protect you and make sure that you can do the things that you want to do. And that, you know, that last bullet point right there, I had to put a little bit of trust in my doctor.
Yeah.
He's telling me that I can do these things. And so my philosophy on it is I'm going to go out there and, you know, live life pretty hard. And
Yeah.
if something happens, I'll reassess. You know, if I don't know, if I damage a lead or break a lead or dislodge a lead or something happens that cause a cardiac arrest, well, then we're going to look at the data, my doctor and we're going to decide, do I need to slow down a little bit or can I get right back at it? And I'm going to do everything I can to get right back at it if that happens. But until then, it's full steam ahead. You know, you can see me fishing there off the coast of Mexico. We had a great time on that day at scuba diving. Yeah, I go to the ball games and
Love it.
downhill ski, all sorts of fun things.
And again, of course, as we always say, everyone should check with their own doctor based on their own situation, their own health situation. But whatever you were able to do before you had the device, you should be able to get back to doing after you've had the device, which is, I think, so hopeful for everyone here. Um, is there any kind of restriction people have after they're completely healed from surgery? Any kind of restrictions that people should think about?
Um, you know, it's kind of a balancing, it's a you know, risk assessment that you have to take of how active are you going to be?
Yeah.
Because if you do take an elbow to your device, it's going to hurt.
Yeah.
If you're pinching the skin, it's going to hurt. So are you going to play competitive soccer, basketball? Are you going to play football? These are all things that you have to talk with your doctor about. There are products out there though that like one is called Vital Beat. It's a shirt you wear that has basically a shield in it that goes over your device.
Oh,
And if I'm going to be playing a real aggressive game of soccer, like a competitive game of soccer, I'll wear that just in case you take an elbow or a head or something to the chest. It actually prevents it from hurting. I mean, it's a fantastic device, fantastic product. So there's a little bit of weighing the risks of how much do you want to do, and you know, are you willing to take the risk of maybe getting hit, falling, but really there's no limitations
yeah.
other than some of the things we talked about. It can't be a pilot if you have a defibrillator, things like that. There are some small limitations, but for the most part, you can do anything. I use all the power tools, the chainsaw and the table saw and leaf blower and all those fun things. I ride four-wheelers, the ATVs, and drive electric cars, and there's really no limitations.
What about welding? Someone had a question about welding.
Yeah, so the concern with welding is that it emits a high level of electromagnetic interference, electromagnetic energy.
Right.
And when your device is looking at your heart, it's actually looking for the electrical signal that travels around the heart. It's not looking at like a heartbeat. It's not looking for the physical beat. It's actually looking for the electricity that indicates that your heart had a beat. And that welding, the EMI, can look a lot like a heartbeat. And so it can confuse your device into thinking your heart is beating, or it's not beating, or it's in fibrillation, or if it's intense enough, it can completely blind the device. That can't see your heart rate at all.
Wow.
And it has to decide what to do with that information. And so usually in that case, if it can't see your heart rate, it'll shock you. If you have an ICD, it'll shock you, just to be safe. Now, there are recommendations for how you can weld safely. So there are certain ways that you coil the cables. I'm not a welder, so I'm talking just by what I read. Certain way to coil the cables and position yourself with the item that you're welding, and then you don't weld for 50 seconds straight. You weld in 5 to 7 second bursts, things like that, so that the device has a chance to see your heart rate and say, oh yeah, everything's fine there, I won't do anything. So there are ways you can do it safely.
So can you visit the Hoover Dam even though you can't work there?
You can visit the dam. You can't go into the turbine room.
You can't do that tour.
Yeah, you can do everything else. You can walk on top of the dam or drive across it. You can tour the dam, but just not in the turbine room while the turbines are running, which is usually all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can do that.
All right. I was just curious. So this is fantastic, Doug. As always, we have a lot of questions that are coming in here. So I would love to move into the Q&A portion of the event. First question, does the new ICD still shock you?
Yeah, the EV-ICD, yes, it does.
That one does.
So the one that's out there now, the Boston Scientific version, the only thing it does is shock. So if it sees a fatal rhythm, it'll shock you and it will get you out of the rhythm. The new one, the EV-ICD, is also able to attempt to end the fatal rhythm with a pacing impulse called ATP, or anti-tachycardia pacing. And this is what all the transvenous devices have. This is what all the ones that go in your chest have. When it sees a fatal rhythm, I mentioned that it takes a little time. It sees the fatal rhythm, then it needs to charge the capacitor, and then it can shock you. So it takes 7 to 12 seconds. During that time, or before it starts to charge even, it will try to pace you out of that rhythm. And ATP is actually quite effective. I mean, most recent studies, I think, was nearly 70% of all fatal rhythms were ended. And so it prevents a shock, which is what most people are afraid of when they have an ICD. That's the thing they fear is, I don't want to get shocked, which is kind of a fun thing to think about. Really, if you need a shock, that's what you want. You want to be shocked.
If you still want to be here tomorrow, you want to be here tomorrow.
Yes. So I try to tell people, don't be afraid of a shock. That's a good thing. But yeah, the new device will try to pace you out of it first. And that's just, I mean, it's amazing technology. So it's another advance in the devices that is great for people like, for patients, for people like us.
Absolutely. What are patient responsibilities with monitoring machine at home? Can you talk a little bit about that remote monitoring, how that works?
Yeah, this is a really big thing in the US. It's not so big in Europe, but it's getting more and more prevalent. Remote monitoring is a way for your doctor to keep an eye on your device when you're in between office visits. And in fact, it used to be where you would be in the office either two to four times a year. So let's say quarterly, that's my schedule. It used to be that you had to go into the office 4 times a year. Now that they have remote monitoring, I only go in once a year. The other 3 device checks are done remotely. And so the device is constantly looking at itself and saying, am I functioning normally? Has anything changed? Is there anything that we should be worried about? And if it sees something, it'll just send a notice to the doctor and say, this is what I saw. And sometimes it's benign. It's nothing really to be worried about. Sometimes it's something they want to keep an eye on and watch. And other times it's things they want to bring you in so they can reprogram the device. And this happened to me, actually. My device was oversensing, basically. So it looked like my heart was beating faster than it really was. And that's a bad thing, because if I get too high, if I get heart rate of, let's say 120, and my device thinks I'm going at 240, it might shock me. So that was one where the doctor called me. They said, we're seeing this. We just want to change the sensitivity of your device so that it's not doing that. And so I went into the hospital, or went to the clinic, and they reprogrammed my device, and I was out of there. So it's a really great way for the doctors to keep an eye on your device to make sure that everything's running normally and that you're still, safe and doing well.
Yeah, I love that remote piece. That makes things so much easier. Um, Becky says, wonderful presentation. Can you talk a little bit about how likely inappropriate shocks are in current devices, and what do you have to do after you are shocked? Do you go to the ER or just call your doctor?
Great question. So let's start with inappropriate shocks. 10 years ago, the inappropriate shock rate was about 12%. So 12% of people would experience an inappropriate shock in any given year. That rate has plummeted. They've gotten so good at preventing inappropriate shocks that it is well below, I think it's around, on average, about 3%, 3.5%,
Well,
even lower sometimes. So it's not common. And usually, if an inappropriate shock occurs, they can look at the data and figure out why it shocked inappropriately and reprogram the device or just change the settings a little bit. It's not a perfect science, so the devices don't come perfectly tuned to you right out of the box. Sometimes there's a little playing they have to do, but they can usually reprogram the device in a way that'll prevent it from happening in the future. And then the second question that was, what do you do after a shock? The
yes.
most common instructions that I hear from doctors is, if you are shocked once and you feel fine, and usually people will feel symptoms when they have a cardiac event and they get shocked. Either they pass out and they don't feel anything, or they feel symptoms and they get shocked. And the doctor says, the doctor will say, if you get shocked and you feel fine, go about your day and call me at your earliest convenience.
Wow,
The devices are so good at what they do, and it's so common now that
wow,
even if you had a cardiac arrest, the
that's
device
amazing.
did its job.
That's totally
So
amazing.
yeah, so go about your day, call me when you can. We'll look at the data, we'll talk about it, but there's probably nothing else we're going to do because
Go
it's
about your
it
day.
worked.
I mean,
Yeah,
imagine if they didn't have the device
yeah,
versus go about your day. I mean,
exactly.
that's sticking in my mind. I'm sorry, for some reason, like that just
No,
hit me.
it is, it's
Um,
crazy. And then the other thing is they say if you get shocked and you don't feel well, or you get shocked more than once in a 24-hour period, doctors usually want you to call them immediately. And if you can't get a hold of them, go to the emergency room. And then
right.
they'll be able to analyze the device and take care of you in the short term, and then you'll see your doctor, whenever you're able to.
Okay. There are some people asking really specific questions, and I would definitely ask them to go back and talk to the manufacturer, talk to their doctor. If they've had something implanted and they're still sore and a lot of bruising and things, they need to go talk to their doctor, call your doctor's office, and see what they say.
Exactly.
How big is the scar for an ICD generally?
Really, they only need enough space to get this in, and there's actually they can put it in the narrow way. So scars are usually about that big.
Okay.
I mean, that just they fit the device in there, and they'll turn it so that it's in the pocket, nice and secure. So they're not terribly long. Um,
Okay.
Sometimes people will develop keloid scars, so the scar kind of gets raised. Mine is really flat, and there's no hair that grows in that spot. So
Right.
when you look at me, I do have a bit of a hairy chest, but you'll see it clearly, like, oh, that's
You can see that
there.
scar.
If
Yeah.
I'm not wearing a shirt, if I'm at the beach or something. And then actually there is something new called a plasma blade, which is phenomenal. It is a particular kind of scalpel that they use, particularly in cosmetic surgery.
Mm.
And some surgeons will use it. And I have seen scars that if I didn't know I was looking for a scar, I would not have seen it at all. So it's
Wow.
pretty amazing. Some doctors use it, not a lot do, but some do.
Can you
But
request it?
you can ask for it. If they
You
don't
know?
use it normally, they probably won't. But yeah, you can ask for it.
Actually, and that's another question. Can you request like a certain device manufacturer?
You can. I mean, the pacemakers and defibrillators, all of the companies make great devices.
Mhm.
They have really smart people and passionate people that work for them. I mean, I work at Medtronic for 17 years. I think I'll be a Medtronic person for my entire life.
Yeah.
I've met the engineers who designed my device. I've been on the manufacturing line. I've met the people who actually built my device. Like I wholeheartedly
incredible.
trust Medtronic. But my son's godfather is a reliability engineer for Boston. I have former colleagues that work at Biotronic. I would have no problem trusting any company's device at all. But if
Yeah,
you are particular, if you you love Medtronic for a reason, you can talk to your doctor and they will try to accommodate you.
right. Oh, that's great. Kind of all in the family. You have like it's all the device stuff going on there.
Yeah, my dad
Um,
has a pacemaker. My son has a loop recorder. Yeah, we
oh, okay.
we're all in on
Um,
Medtronic.
um, and how difficult is the surgery to have a device changed out? So I mean, other than the scar tissue, it's probably similar to the original surgery, right?
It's very similar. The good news is that usually your leads will last a very, very long time, anywhere from 20 to 40 years. I mean, they can last a very long time. So they usually don't have to replace the leads. So what they do is they open up that same incision spot. They'll take the device out. You know, they will, here, let me grab a thing. They basically take the device out, they unplug the old device and put it aside and put a new one on, and they just pop the lead back in and put it back in the pocket. So replacement surgeries from, entering the OR to leaving, that could be done in 25 minutes, pretty quickly.
Wow. Oh my goodness, that's incredible. Like incredibly fast.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. Um, Terrific speaker. So that's shout out to you.
Well, thank you.
Um, let's see. Some of these are really specific to a person's situation. And again, I ask you to go back and talk to your doctor, talk to your medical team. Really, we're not here to give medical advice. So anything that's super specific, I'm sorry, we're not going to be able to answer. We're not qualified to answer. Don said, thank you. You have answered my questions. Thank you for giving me hope and sharing your story. So that's
Pleasure.
lovely. Um, let's see. And what about people who, several questions are about people who are really nervous about receiving a shock. I mean, I think that not having been in the shoes of someone who has a device or who, would be worried about that, I would think that's a normal fear for sure about
Mhm.
receiving a shock. What can people do to brace themselves? Is there anything that's like that would lead you to know that you're about to have a shock, or it kind of happens just out of the blue?
There's no alarm or, buzzer or anything like that
Yeah.
that will say, hey, you're about to get shocked. Um, Really, it happens out of the blue. Um, for some people, it will be, you might experience symptoms. For me, the loop recorder captured an event where I was on the verge of passing out. So my vision was gone and my hearing was gone.
Oh yeah.
I think I was a half second from hitting the floor.
Wow.
And that only lasted about 4 seconds. So by the time I realized, uh-oh, I mean, it was that quick. It was uh-oh, and it was done. And so you really don't have time to prepare. Like you really don't have time to think, oh, I might get shocked. It will just happen. And usually, for most people, if you have an ICD, for most people, you'll be unconscious when it happens.
Right. Wow.
Because
Yeah.
it takes a while for it to charge and to shock. But for the people who are conscious, what I understand is that they typically feel symptoms. They typically feel really lightheaded or really dizzy, really
Okay.
lethargic. They're kind of out of it a little bit, and then they're shocked. And so, what does it feel like? I've never been shocked, and so I've talked to a lot of people who have been shocked. What does it feel like? What I've been told is everything from just a sudden jolt that
Mm.
isn't painful at all. It's just sudden and surprising. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I've heard people say, well, it feels like getting kicked in the chest by a donkey.
Okay.
Um, so,
Yeah.
somewhere in between there,
Yeah.
it's hard to say how do you prepare for that. I guess, again, keep in mind that the vast majority of time when ICDs shock, it's to save your life. And so getting kicked in the chest by a horse to save your life, okay, I'll take it.
Yeah.
That's how
Yeah.
I kind of prepare for it. That's how I think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I imagine that makes a lot of sense to a lot of folks. It's a risk that you're willing to take to be here another day for your family and so forth.
Yeah.
Um, if you're
I see one question here. Is there a leadless defibrillator? And the answer is no, not yet.
okay.
And again, this is the leadless pacemaker. It's tiny, tiny, tiny. The problem with condensing this down to this is physics. There
Yes.
needs to be enough battery to charge the capacitor, and the capacitor needs to be large enough to accept a charge quickly enough to shock you to save your life. So these devices, they could probably get them maybe eventually half the size of this, but then
Wow.
they're going to run
Okay.
into some real problems with physics by getting the battery and the capacity down. So there's nothing like this for defibrillators yet.
Okay. All right. Good to know. If your battery is getting low, will they replace the device or just the battery?
These are actually, so the devices are hermetically sealed containers of titanium. So you can't
Okay.
just replace the battery. They'll replace the whole device. And the best part about that is that because these last so long, I mean, my device has been in there for 10 years. It's rated to last another 2.5. That's how much battery life I have left in it.
Okay.
You'll want a new device. I mean, think about if you
Yeah.
were still using that smartphone from, 2007, right? Like
Yeah.
you want a new device. So yeah, they replaced the whole thing.
Yeah, fantastic. And again, if we didn't answer your question, it's just because it was very specific to your condition and your situation. And please do reach out and speak to your doctor. But thank you, Doug. Excellent presentation as always. We love having you. So informative, so helpful, and sharing that knowledge with people, I think hopefully will give them a little bit more confidence. So if we're going to go back to the deck here for a quick second, Justine, and I can share, Doug has all kinds of places you can find him online. You do not have to write these down or memorize them. I will be sending them to you in the follow-up email. So you can search YouTube for Douglas, and I'm always saying your last name wrong.
Racek.
It's not a long name, Racek. And on Facebook, he helps moderate some groups there, and he's on Reddit and TikTok. But again, all of this will be rolled up and sent along with this webinar recording in an email that I will send out first thing tomorrow morning. So if you do have any questions, let us know. But really amazing information on here. And Doug, thank you. We love having you. So I think this is the third or fourth time.
Fourth time. Yeah, my
Fourth
pleasure.
time. We got to have it every year. So thank you again for everyone who could participate and ask questions tonight. And people are saying thanks in the comment. Excellent. If we can go on to the next slide, Justine, just a few more things here. Huge shout out and thanks to all of our sponsors whose names you see there, and without whose help and support all year, we wouldn't be able to bring you all this amazing information. Next slide. And for more information about the DCM Foundation, please go to dcmfoundation.org. For information about genetics and cardiomyopathy, genetic testing, any questions you have related to genetic cardiomyopathy, please go to geneticcardiomyopathy.org. Next slide. And that's it. Perfect timing. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Hope you have a great evening or rest of the day wherever you are. Stay cool, be well, and hopefully we'll see you next time. There's no webinar in August, but we will be sending out information about our next webinar, which will be held in September. So thank you all. Thanks to Doug again, and thank you to Justine behind the scenes. Have a great night, everyone. Take care now. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.